Spurs versus Liverpool passed without any controversy. But the big question from the game, for me, JJ Bull, and him,
Jon Mackenzie,
is shouldn't Tottenham have absolutely battered Liverpool because they had 10 men than 9 men? It should be easier to play against 10 men. Yes?
Yes.
Then why wasn't it?
Well, I think we need to talk a little bit about what happened to Liverpool after they went down to 10 men.
We know they had 11, what they were trying to do against them. They're trying to beat them. That is the aim of the game of football. But at 10 men, what happened?
Curtis Jones gets sent off.
Yes.
So he's off here.
After our video on him, it did very well, yes.
JJ cursed him. So you've lost a player, and what most teams will do in this situation is just go to a 4-4-1 shape, like this.
Yes, it seems standard.
Actually, what Liverpool have done in this situation is actually put Salah as the outlet rather than it's in the central area rather than the wide area.
Because he is worse at defending, or because he's more of a threat on the counter?
Both, I would say. So you know that you're probably going to end up doing a lot of defensive work with your wingers now, and also like Salah is your most dangerous attacking player when he's up against a couple of centre-backs on the opposition in space.
And it makes total sense, right? 2 banks of 4, so you've got limited space between them, so it's very hard to break down. You're mostly showing the opposite team wide because the ball can only really go around these areas because there's no room to spread it through here.
Yeah.
That's the thinking here. But then surely with an extra man, you should be able to open them up.
Sure. Well, I guess the thing that you need to think about here is like what has been lost by losing a player. Because essentially most teams, in Liverpool, they do press out in this shape, right? Normally, they usually just have a number 6 in this spot here.
Yeah, so, but they have a 2 sometimes, right? And they sort of have a block.
Sometimes, and a lot of teams will do this, right? So a lot of teams will play with a 4-4-2 block. And the reason why they do that is because with 2 players in your forward line, it's much harder for the opposition to settle, and you get a lot more coverage in that front line. And the problem becomes, right, when you lose a player, the tendency then is to just have the one player on their own. The wingers, usually Liverpool are pressing out the front 3 like this, but in this situation, the wingers are going to drop back. And so what you're doing is you're ceding a lot of space in this area, which I guess you sort of say, well, what else can we do? We've got 10 men, but Jurgen Klopp is aware of this and he doesn't want to allow the opposition to have really comfortable possession at the point of engagement, right? So usually Liverpool will be engaging up here. In this situation, they're going to be engaging a lot deeper, so around the halfway line.
Yeah.
And with their wingers dropped in as well. And to counter that, so to make it so that the opposition don't have just comfortable possession in the first line of their build-up, he's going to get these 8s pushing out on the ball side. So you'll see Szoboszlai on the right-hand side pushing out and everyone else then feeding in.
Right, and then the run, I guess, is to try and block the pass. So Van de Ven could easily play through to Maddison,
exactly.
So you maybe curve your run at this to try and stop that.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
So the idea then is that what you're actually doing is you're pretty much playing with a 4-4-2 shape, but with one fewer player now in this area here. So what this means is that usually you'll usually have a number 6, just giving you a little bit of more defensive cover in that area.
Yeah.
You don't have that now. So what that means is the other number 8 has to drop in and help out. So these 2 players now have to do a phenomenal amount of work because when the ball's on the other side, Szoboszlai drops back in and then McAllister's pushing out here, right? So you're not allowing any really nice settled possession or easy progression from these areas.
Yeah.
You're making sure that doesn't happen. And to be honest, this is exactly what Liverpool do normally. So what they've done is they've not really changed their press that much. Usually they'd be in this sort of situation against a back 4. And if the ball's on this side, usually the 8 would push out on a certain trigger.
Yeah.
And the same on the other side as well. So you're always sort of making this 4-2-4 shape with the extra player in here. You're getting the extra cover from the 6, which means that you're not allowing space to open up in the middle. And they're doing exactly the same thing here, but just with one player in that middle. So that's where the weak area lies. And that's the big question is, how do you then exploit this weakness?
Well, exactly, John. How should Spurs break this down? Now, in theory, for me, you've got Salah here, you've got your 4 midfield. So the space is going to be wide. So you want to either you can try and double up here, and so you've got options to put in the box. But the problem you have with Spurs is that the only guy in the middle, really, striker, is Son. He's not huge. He's not really able to, shouldn't be able to score a header against Matip and Van Dijk. So chucking the ball in the box is not really going to work. And then maybe there's a fear that if you chuck the ball in the box and try and feed off second balls, Liverpool will counter you. Even with 10 men, it's still risky. So what should Spurs do? Or what should they have done, I suppose? Or what did they do?
I mean, in my head, the way that Spurs usually play, actually, I think is the best way of playing against a team like this. Now, I say that in terms of like the structure of what they're trying to do, because often what Spurs are trying to do is bait the opposition forward to create space to then attack, which isn't going to happen here, right? Because they're not going to be baited forward necessarily.
Right.
But with Spurs, you get these triangles on both sides of the field with the fullback, the wide player, and then the number 8 on that side. So you have 2 triangles here, and the idea of that is to generate this overload against the wide player and the fullback on the opposition team, to be able to possess the ball for longer, to generate these openings, and to work the ball into dangerous areas. And the area that they're trying to hit is sort of around here, right? So they can then play these balls across the box or maybe cutbacks into the D. And I think this is like when you're playing against a team like this, who are going to be sitting in this low block in 2 banks of 4 like this. Once you've got them forced back, once you've got around that initial press, that's what you need to do. You need to try and say, well, where's the weakness? We've already talked about the weakness being in the centre. How do we open that weakness out? And I think the best way that you can do that is by getting this overload here with the 3 players that you have in your structure anyway. Yeah. That's going to pull out the wide player and also the wide player and the fullback, so the wide forward Diaz.
Well, I guess it does if they bite, right? So if they go out, because then they might try and hold shape.
Yeah, exactly. So either they then are faced with like a bit of a difficult question, right? Because if the Spurs do have the overlap here, then they should, in theory, with the ball, be able to work the ball around these 2 players and get it into this kind of area to play either the ball across the box, which is dangerous.
Especially, I guess, also, if you push, because they're going to be pushed further up, right? Yeah. So maybe you get Romero, makes it more of a diamond, or you get this weird shape over on the side as well.
Yeah, well, actually, what happened was that, well, we'll get onto that, but what I was going to say is that the other thing that you want to then do is, if you're able to find this space, you want to have your players hitting this line, pulling the opposition defence deeper, and again, then opening space up on the D. So then it presents you with the possibility of these 2 dangerous chances, right?
Yes.
Like across the box or to the edge of the D. And as we've said, because there's only 2 players here rather than 3 as you usually have, there should be more space here. And again, if there's 3 players here and Liverpool decide the best way of dealing with that is to have one of them pull out, again, you're exacerbating that central weakness because it's going to be the 8 on that side. So in my head, the way that Spurs play, yes, you want to temper things a little bit because the actual overview tactically is we're not trying to bait them and then attack at speed. We're actually trying to generate chances through patient build-up. Right. Everything, I think, should play into Spurs' hand here. But the problem is they didn't do this.
Yeah, right? They didn't do that at all, no. Because the thing we've seen when Liverpool have been like taken apart in past games is that teams like to switch the play a lot, because when they drop into that tight shape, I think, remember Aston Villa beat them like 7-2 or something that one year, and it was just like switching, moving them from side to side. So if Spurs weren't able to get this to happen, what was it they were doing instead?
So I think that the big worry that Spurs had was this outball to Salah, right?
Right.
We've had the Newcastle game recently, where Liverpool go down to 10 men, losing 1-0.
They were better with 10 men.
End up winning with 2-1 from that game, right? Yeah. And the reason they did that is they play Salah for a while, they bring on Nunez, and he scores 2 goals from just balls through the defence mess up, and then he has these really nice finishes across the goalkeeper. And I think that like Spurs were worried about that in such a way that they've never really ended up utilising this wide diamond at all. I've got plenty of clips actually which show how little Spurs are actually getting all 3 of their players into this wide area to overload and then cause problems for this Liverpool number 8 here. So we've got Porro here, we've got Kulusevski here. That's 2 of the diamond. Yeah. Pat Matasar nowhere to be seen here because he's sitting in a more defensive position in case they lose the ball.
Is that for control though, or do you think that comes down to things that are outside of the tactical part of the game, where it's mentality? Maybe you're still scared of Liverpool in the break. You just don't want to rush it, right? You want to just wait and try and squeeze more.
I think it's not about necessarily control, because if you want control here, surely bringing in a third player into this area now means you've got a 3v2. You're going to be able to possess the ball, regardless of whether or not you're going to be able to create a dangerous chance from here. Yeah. You're going to be able to hold the ball easier 3v2.
So should they be taking more risk then? Because there's the thing, right? So they have the advantage, the man advantage. So then surely we think they should be beating them because they have an advantage. But unless you take risk and push that advantage, you don't really gain any advantage. Yeah, exactly. And I think I think for the most part, Spurs were too conservative in the way that they played. They stopped doing the things that they're good at. And it's weird, right? Because when Spurs were 11v11, they're very happy to have these 3 players in the same sort of area against 11 men. But when Liverpool go down 1, and then they're suddenly just going to go straight to low block and counter football, Spurs are like, oh, this is much more
worrying than what they were doing before, which is a kind of weird way of looking at things.
They even scored one, right? Diaz's goal was when they had 10, it was hit over the top, and then he managed to chase through and score on the break, right? So
yeah. I've got a few other screenshots as well. So here, like you've got the two players in the wide area, but no one actually trying to make this a more difficult proposition for them. Okay, we've got Szoboszlai over here, just keeping an eye on the ball carrier. If the ball carrier's over here now, you've got 3v3, but you've now isolated that space in the middle that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And what Spurs then should be trying to do is just working these overloads. Again, have maybe Maddison come across, make it a 4v3, with the intention of getting the ball into this area, which then, I mean, that's what Spurs are trying to do normally. So you just get into your routines of being like, okay, we know what happens when we get here, but not happening. Here we've got Kulusevski, like 2v1.
It's almost like a 3 with the wide player coming back.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got Robertson here. I think this is probably McAllister, right? And then you've got Diaz dropping in. But again, no one else from Spurs to be seen in this situation. Same again, a few minutes later, it's 2v1 here. You've got Porro too far away behind the player anyway. There's no support player here to make this a more controlled situation.
There's not enough risk. There's too much balance.
Yeah, I think
and too much balance makes for a boring seesaw.
Yeah. And then another one here. I mean, in this situation as well, we've got Maddison here with Kulusevski 2v2, and in this situation, like surely the obvious ball is to hit this area here, get Kulusevski in behind, and then look, you've got all the Spurs players lined up. If you push that back line back, you then have space opening up on the edge of the D. You've got Son here waiting in case that line goes back. This is what they should be trying to do. Instead, I think Maddison actually just tries to play the cross in too quickly. So again, you have these advantages, but you've generated these advantages, or even despite not having the best structure to generate these advantages, and you've not taken them. And this was the problem, I think, again and again for Spurs.
So with 10 men, had Spurs taken more risk, they may well have gained the advantage that they had by having an extra player on the pitch. So we can kind of see why that maybe was. It's Liverpool, right? You're a bit worried of them on the counter, even with 10, because they've got Salah and everyone who can just run through. But I put it to you, Jon Mackenzie, that when they went down to 9 men, surely they should batter them because you've got another extra player. Like you can just push them. If they think, who went off again? It was Gakpo came off for Jota. He came on the right. So Jota again gets sent off. So now so what do you do now? You've got 4-3-1. You want to block wide areas, stop crosses coming in. Even though there's not a huge amount of threat in the middle from Spurs' players that they have, from wide crosses. If you're trying to get low crosses, obviously it's a different thing altogether. But what we got, I think they go to a 5, so they put on wing backs and play just with a 5 and a 3. Yeah,
so again, like when you're playing with a 4, so let's imagine that Jota's on here.
Yeah.
As we're saying, often the wide players is basically having to drop into that first line, right, to make sure that Robertson isn't getting pulled out.
Yeah.
Same on the other side, right? Jota drops in so that Gomez isn't being pulled out. As soon as you lose that extra player, you're trying to work the same sorts of situations, but rather than having the opportunity for these players to be wingers and push up nominally, you're just saying, okay, we're gonna cede that space entirely. We're going to make sure we've got that width here so that we can afford to send a player out in those wide areas in case of build-up, to make sure that there's never going to be an easy cross that isn't under pressure, and vice versa. So you're always ending up with that back 4 one way or the other, with the wing back pushing out.
And then I suppose it's Spurs' job to try and open this up again. There's a couple of different ways you could look at it. Philosophically, do you try and move the ball around faster to open them up? Or do you just stand still and wait for them to open up and come to you? Because I guess the threat for Liverpool, because naturally you're playing against 9 men, right? I mean, or 9 players. Like what you have here is that their threat is going to be getting away on the counter if you push up. Yeah. But with this, it's inviting you to come up and try and squeeze them in so they can't escape. So this is what you maybe should do. Maybe you could play the goalkeeper here as a sweeper, but then you can get lobbed. There's lots of risk, but if you don't take the risk, you don't get the reward. So even when they have 2-player advantage, they're still trying to build chances that are going into this area around here, rather than, like, if they build up here, they put the ball in the box, it's not really a chance, right?
Yeah, I felt as though Spurs were doing too much of trying to get the ball into the half space here and play it into the air, into a loaded box, right? When you've got Konate, Matip, Van Dijk. That's not a way that's it's not going to work very well. And in many respects, it's worth recognising that structurally in a low block phase, this is the same as playing against 10 men, right? Because what we've done is we've said, okay, usually it's 4v4 in the low block, and you have a player up here who's doing like initial first press stuff. You take that away, and what you're saying is, okay, we're just going to allow them to have pressure. We can't pressure them when they're in their build-up phase. We now have to defend in this 2 banks of 4. Actually, we're going to make it a 5 because there's no point having these players potentially getting forward. So structurally, this is very similar to what's happening before, but it's even easier for you to possess the ball if they win the ball back, Liverpool are just going to hit it long, and then you can reset and you can bring it again. So you're just going to have wave of pressure coming in here. The same principles still apply. You're still trying to cause these situations where you're pulling these players across, you're exacerbating these weaknesses here. And again, time and time again, it felt as though Spurs were panicking. They were trying to generate stuff from these kind of areas rather than trying to hit in behind the line, as we were saying, and then playing. I mean, the goal itself came from this situation, right, where they actually finally got into a fairly nice situation.
And they just punted it onto Matip.
And look, it wasn't a pretty goal by any stretch of the imagination.
It's a good finish.
But it was a brilliant finish. If you were a striker, you'd take that, wouldn't you? The other way around. But the point is that in these scenarios, you just have to be constantly forcing the defence to be making those hard decisions, facing back to their own goal, knowing that, I mean, in the situation where they actually scored, there was a player at the back post coming in who would have tapped it in. So Matip does have to get something on it. He's played it terribly. He's set his body terribly. It's come off his shin, whatever. At the same point in time, he still has to get something on that, because if he doesn't, it's going to drop through to the back post and result in a goal. So maybe it's worth just showing that last goal, because there's a few things that we see from the actual goal, which was the first time where Spurs had done things quite well. So we've already talked a little bit about tempo. So there's a situation here. This is just the run up to the goal. Spurs win the ball and they actually move it down the field quite quickly. There's been a few situations where Liverpool have pressed quite high up the field, lost the ball, and Spurs are too patient, I think, moving the ball towards the opposition goal. And that I think they got the tempo wrong in this game. Like you play quickly in these moments when the opposition are open structurally, and then you play slow in the final third. Whereas Spurs were doing it the other way around. They were playing slow in the first 2/3 and then playing a bit too quickly, I thought, in the final third. In this situation, they moved from this scenario.
That is deliberate though, isn't it? You want control and then you try and speed it up to disrupt.
I think so, but like when you're playing against a low block, if they are going to be willing to be as aggressive as they are here, so there's 3 Liverpool players here. That means there's only 6 players defending. If you can move back before they can get into their block, there's going to be a lot more space.
So you're
for you
saying
to
chuck
attack.
it forwards?
Yeah, not chuck it forwards, but like Spurs did a really good job in this phase of play of just moving the ball quickly and arriving in this scenario.
That was very quick.
This was really quick. So this is about 15.
That was one click. You were there.
14 seconds later, right? So they've moved the ball just straight down the line, and we've got this scenario now. We've got Kulusevski up against Robertson. Robertson's having to pull out. They've not got their back 4 beside Robertson sorted out. The players in front of them are all.
They've been overloading that last line. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
So again, you've got this situation now where you're in a scenario where you've got the advantage structurally. There's probably too many. But again, the Spurs players are loading the box, and in this,
the last 30 seconds, you might as well go.
Yeah, it's true. I guess in this scenario, Kulusevski decides that there's no real chance on here, so he actually plays it back to Romero now. But what they actually do, they end up with it. So now they've arrived in this situation where Liverpool are back in their block, right? There's their 5 players and their 3 players in front of them.
So they've made it harder for themselves by not doing
yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean by tempo. The tempo now means that Liverpool are in this nice block.
Do you think if the situation was trained for, I don't think you trained to play against 9 men, but would you say that Postecoglou would then have instructed his players to do this in a different way?
I think so. And a lot of this does come down to the fact that Postecoglou's not been working with this group of players for a while, right? And he's not going to come in and be like, okay, in pre-season, and be like, okay, one of the most important things we're going to have to deal with this season is playing against 10 or 9 men. So that stuff comes later on, and you hope that the players are able to solve those situations on the pitch to a degree. But the other thing that's happened here is that we've actually ended up with those 3 players that we were talking about in that wide area. And this actually does cause some structural problems for Liverpool in this scenario. So we've got Skip, who's the centre midfielder on that side. We've got Kulusevski, who's the wide player on that side, and we've got Porro, and they're all in the same area. And this actually does allow them to do a couple of things. One of them is that it pulls the space apart. So we see Skip here is now going to move back inside, and he's going to drag Robertson with him a little bit. It's going to create space in this area for Porro to get the ball.
Yeah.
So here we can see like Skip's moved inside. Robertson has gone one way and then has to come to the other side. But now you've got this overload in this area. Liverpool moving back to their own goal, which, as we've said, is dangerous. Spurs players on the last line as well, so looking to pull that line deeper, so you'll have the space on the edge of the D. This is what you want teams to be doing against 10 men, creating these sorts of problems, right? Because if you allow them set structure and then don't make them work for it, then they'll be just heading out.
And it basically wasn't until the final few seconds when they have freedoms, they might as well go for it. Like the reward at the end is so tangible that you might as well go for it, and that's when they get it. So you've got to take risks to succeed.
You've got to take risks. And yeah, here we are now. So Porro gets the ball. with this perfect corridor to play the ball into, because Robertson has been pulled inside, so they haven't, he's got a little bit more space and time, and as a result, he's going to play it along this line, and that's what they eventually. I mean, the ball goes in, Matip steps in, comes off his leg, and that's the goal. But you've got is this man Solomon at the back post coming in? He would be in a dangerous situation had the ball not been hit. He probably would have tapped it in as well. So yeah, I think that's the story of the game for me, is that Spurs were way too conservative. They stopped doing the things that they're good at in order to make sure that Liverpool weren't able to do the things that they were good at when down to 10 men. Had they been playing like this the whole game, it probably would have been a bit more of a foregone conclusion.
Okay. So what should they have done? They had to play against 8 men.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.